Welcome to another episode of 3D Printing News Unpeeled, courtesy of 3dprint.com. So today we've got a couple of news items for you today, and the first one is from Orbex. Orbex is a space launch company that extensively uses 3D printing, and they have recently raised 45.7 million US dollars in Series C funding. That's on top of an additional raise of 54 million they've raised since 2017. So they spent, or they have to spend, they've probably spent a lot of money already, over 100 million. This money is augmented by some money from the European Commission's Horizon 2020 program, ESA, the European Space Agency's Boost initiative, and it has investors High-Tech Grunder Funds, Octopus Ventures, Hardcore Capital, the Scottish National Investment Bank, Jacobs, the Danish Green Future Fund, and Verve Ventures, among others, in them. So this is huge news, I think. A lot of space companies have raised more, but they typically tend to be American space companies. So the current new space race is virtually an all-American affair. And there's some activity going on in India, which is encouraging, and there's a bunch of startups as well in China. But those are typically the places where this kind of thing is happening. There's very little, new space activity ongoing in the rest of the world, and even very little in Europe, even though we see a lot of 3D printing stuff happening there. So this is great news for the UK, because that's a launch site. That's where this vehicle is going to be developed and is being developed, and good news generally for Europe. It's also interesting to note that even though the EU has parted ways with Britain, or Britain has parted ways with the EU, there's still some funding things going up and back, and there's still some European cooperation through Horizon still, and ESA and other things as well, which is good to know. What Orbex is trying to do is it's developing satellite launch vehicles, similar to like what Launcher is doing, I guess, in the States. They have a thing called the Prime, which is a 19-meter high rocket that's being developed in Sutherland, in the Space Hub Sutherland in Scotland. It's a two-stage rocket. It has 7 3D printed engines in it, and they use AMCM for M4K machines, which are they're by EOS. They're kind of EOS is really large custom machines, and they also are known to use silicon as a departing solution, as a lot of these guys do. So another good, win for 3D printing generally, and I guess a win for Europe as a continent this time, as in, well, not 100% of the startups in the space race are going to be American. The next news item is that IC3D, an Ohio-based kind of service bureau that makes its own printers and that kind of thing, is getting 800,000 US dollars from NIST or NIST. NIST is the US kind of National Standards Authority. I love this. I think this is a wonderful news item. So this is a small business innovation research grants, SBIR grant, for regionalized quality control centers for mobilization of distributed additive manufacturing. We all remember from the depths of the COVID epidemic that at one point we were printing face shields, a whole number of medical devices and things, and people were trying to develop new ventilators, all sorts of things. Now, it's easy to forget that time, or a lot of people want to forget that time. But what we learned, and especially what with 3dprint.com we were talking about a lot, was that safety was a big concern, standards were a big concern, and trying to make sure these things were actually safe was, and then could perform as intended, was a big despite everyone's good intentions, this was still a problem. And it's easy to forget how dark those days were and just how desperate the times were. And the NIST has not forgotten. I think this is absolutely wonderful of them. And what they're doing is essentially saying, look, here, take 800K, try to figure out if you could do a regional center for like Ohio and an environment for this 3D printed parts qualification. So that means that not everything is going to fall on the VA or the NIST itself or other people, but regionally, so they could later on then spread this out across the US. Several different centers could all kind of work on this qualification process, trying to get the designs that solve whatever emergency problem, whether it be PPE or medical device or whatever, get those designed in, get them qualified, get them standardized much quicker. I think it's an absolutely wonderful thing to speed up the whole regulatory thing, and still, on the one hand, use the advantage of 3D printing to deliver this technology very quickly, and on the other hand as well, do it in a safe way. I think it's fantastic. The NIST hasn't forgotten these dark days and is trying to come up with a solution which can help us for the next crisis, whichever that crisis could be. And I think this is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I think it's fantastic. The next thing is a paper from Harvard. This is elegant. This is super elegant. It's really, really nice. The paper is titled 3D printed machines that manipulate microscopic objects using capillary forces. It's by Cheng Zhang and Maya Winters Faborg. So what they're essentially using is they're using capillary force, which we maybe all remember from science class, these forces that can suck materials up or down a capillary tube. That's probably your frame of reference, as was mine. And they're using these forces to make objects. So what they're doing is they're 3D printing channels. Then they trap the object inside these channels. You can see that in the picture. Um, and the capillary forces, or in this case, the repulsive capillary force, suspends these things in them. And then by varying these channels, they can then essentially weave these objects together, right? They can move them, they direct the motion of them in the water bath and grow them or weave them and make them into kind of structures in this way by varying these objects. Their own application area, what they think of is that they're doing kind of things like braiding micrometer filaments, for example. But I think the making micro wires for electronics. But given, like, if you see in the second picture now, you can see these individual structures seem quite facile to make, and then by varying them, you could get really, really different patterns. I like this because it's very, very unique, and it can do things that maybe we cannot do very well with a lot of other 3D printing technologies. Now, think of something like a stent, something like a kind of balloon type of a thing, or a stent, a controlled kind of mesh-like structure for managing and controlling that stent, or other kind of micro devices in the body. Think of how difficult it would be to make things like this really reliably and cost effectively. Using other 3D printing technologies, these kind of micro nano type size objects. The idea they can weave these things means that they can have objects that can expand in the body, for example, and close, or you can have an stent by itself just operate on this principle of opening and closing using these mesh kind of braided 3D printed type structures. I think this is hugely exciting because again, this is like new. It's going to take a long time. The time of doing this is going to probably take a while, but it looks like a very inexpensive, potentially, printing process that could lead to very complex pattern devices that could be woven together. Like, you can wove one strand together and then weave it together with multiple strands later on in different devices as well, right? To create kind of like a meta braided material that can have all sorts of properties in tightening and closing it and making it change form. So super excited about the future possibilities of this. Although, we all realize, of course, this is very far off. So thank you so much, guys, for this. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was useful for you. My name is Joris Peels, and this is another 3D Printing News Unpeeled, courtesy of 3dprint.com. Have a great day.